Thanks for joining us as we take a look at why emperors fall, why empires fall, lessons from the kings of Israel and Judah, otherwise known as
what causes the collapse of nations.
Yeah, so this is more than just Israel and Judah. We're doing a whole broad thing, but we're starting with them as a bit of a launch pad because there's a relationship they have with God. I'm John Newton, science fiction author, and I'm joined by Eric from Your Brother in Christ. If you get the chance, please check out my short stories on Amazon and other places where great books are sold. And the last one, Child of the Stone, is a prequel to the novel that's going to be released in January, early January next year. The Healing Stone, and I'm really excited about this. We're getting a lot of downloads for the short stories. They're doing fantastic. The short stories are free. The novel will not be free, but the short stories are in the top 100 of their categories. We're changing culture, recapturing hearts and minds, one story at a time. And I want to thank everyone who has taken the time to download a copy, and especially for those who have written a review on that. These are fantastic. They really do help. So why did the kings of ancient Israel and Judah fall? Was it simply a matter of poor leadership, or was there something deeper? And then tonight, we're going to be exploring the biblical account of the kings of Israel and Judah, their faithfulness or lack thereof, and faithfulness to Yahweh, this economic and spiritual and physical consequences of going the other way, of saying, we got a better thing to do. We don't want anything to do with you, God. We're going to take a hike and go the opposite direction. And how does that relate? How does that downfall of those two kingdoms relate to empires or nations today? Are we witnessing such a downfall right now? And we have so much to cover tonight that we won't be able to cover everything. I mean, this is everything from biblical history to modern theories about the rise and fall of nations. But if you want a shorter version of what we're talking about, it's this. Nations rise and fall, but Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and forever. And we have a civic duty to participate and be involved, but ultimately, we are the citizens of a much different kingdom than what we're living in right now. So our kingdom is not of this earth. We're participating in something else. So we took a couple of polls. Why not? Everyone else is doing it right now. And the first poll that we put up, we asked the question, what is the biggest factor? I'm sure you can read the little tiny writing right here. I probably should have made this bigger. I apologize for that.
You know what he told me when I did images right here in the middle? Make it bigger. Blow it up.
Blow it up. Well, that way you can see his smiley face as we do this. But I'll read through what this says. And I'm sure that some of you guys participated in this as well. The first poll, we asked the question, what is the biggest factor in the rise and fall of empires? And there were 43 votes. Abandoning core values and faith in God, or poor leadership and governance, or natural cycles, such as the Strauss Howe generational theory, or economic stability, instability, and inequality. Abandoning core values by far got the top votes. Of course, these are probably voted by people who are subscribers to this channel. So there's going to be a certain bias to that. We understand that. It's no big deal. But abandoning core values got 72%. You could see the big line right there. If nothing else, you can see that. Poor leadership and governance, 19%, and natural cycles, 20. What do you think? So let me just go through this again. Abandoning core values and faith in God, poor leadership, natural cycles, economic instability.
I'd have to go back to poor leadership probably, but it's a catch. Really, poor leadership is kind of a catch-all. Because if you have a poor leader, then they're not going to hold to the principles that are established. And there's a great question in this. Another aspect, and it wasn't an option on there, is succession, changing from one leader to another. And in a lot of ways, we see many nations break up or fragment based upon succession.
Well, that would be poor leadership and governance. So that would be part of that offer there. I would vehemently disagree. I think it is based mostly on our relationship with God as a group of people either follows God or not. Now,
It
does that
depends
mean
on the type of nation you're looking at.
Okay, explain.
If you're looking at the kings of Israel, then absolutely. If you're looking at a Christian founded nation like the U.S.,
right?
Yes. If you're looking at like the first Islamic State, the answer is no.
Okay.
Because God really didn't have much to do. The true God didn't have much to do with that. Although succession was a massive issue, which then caused the first great division between the Muslims, which would be the Sunni Shia split. And that's all goes back to who had the right to rule after Muhammad.
Well, I would disagree because ultimately God is sovereign and God guides the hearts and minds of kings and leaderships and the whole thing. He orchestrates the whole thing, no matter who's in charge, no matter what governance is going on and everything. He still is in charge of what's going on behind the scenes.
Yes, God is in control of everything. Yes, but looking at the factors that contribute to it, that would be what happened there. If you look at the fall of Rome, in a lot of ways, you can point to Christianity as being an element of that. Because they got away from their core values, which were not Christian, and adopted Christianity. But through that fall, we saw a quick expanse of the
so rewind it a little bit. You're saying Christianity was the cause of the fall.
Not the cause. I did not say that.
Okay, so what
I say it was a contributing factor to that, because if you look at your original poll there,
okay,
they abandoned their original gods and took on Christianity, made it popular, made it the cool thing to do. In so doing, compromise the integrity of Christianity, because you're no longer Christian because you believe, as the cool thing to be was this new Christian religion going through the Roman Empire at the time.
So I think we need to take a close look at the Roman Empire at another time to say if that's really because.
And there's like 1,000 contributing factors to it, so it's not like it's
okay. So I would argue against what you're saying, because there's a lot of people then that are not a lot of people, but there are some theories now that have gained some popularity to say it was because Rome became Christian that it led to its downfall. I would disagree.
Well, if you're saying that is the main factor, is the top one on there, compromising their original principles weren't Christian.
Abandoning core values and faith in God. Okay, so what you're saying is the core values of the Roman Republic, or then the which became the Roman Empire,
was steeped in paganism, their pagan beliefs. Okay. Primarily, when you talk about their armies being sons of Mars, and that they are all following this code of warrior conduct. And that's one of the things we see with the degradation of the Roman Empire, is you can actually tell by the armor when it was made, because you see that it's less and less quality as it goes on.
Okay.
Later on, but they did abandon those concepts.
Okay, so maybe when I was phrasing that sentence, abandoning core values, as being, I was thinking in my mind that those would be core Christian or like Judeo-Christian values, and not the core values of an evil empire.
Yes.
If it's core values of an evil empire, yeah, you do want to abandon those. You don't want them to be there. So I've got a couple of comments here. Thomas Hall says, Nineveh was warned by Johann to... Johann?
I think meant Jonah.
I think you're right.
I think Jonah.
to change their violent ways, and they were pagan. And Rome lasted
than
another
1,000
1,000
in the
years
east.
in the east.
Yes,
correct.
So they split. You had the western and the eastern. That split happened. Eventually, the western fell first, and the eastern eventually fell. It took a long time. They held on there a long time.
Yeah. So I would say so. Let's take a look at Babylon, for example. I'm talking about the Chaldean Empire, the ancient Babylonian Empire. Here you have a nation that was, or a nation empire that was, I would say, an evil empire, and they were used by God for specific purpose. So God raised them up. That's what I'm talking about, like with other kings and nations and so forth. God raised them up for a particular purpose. I think that there are nations that are that God does allow to be orchestrated and raised up like that, even some Islamic nations, for purposes that we may not understand or know.
Yes,
what they're done for. So,
yes, God is in control of everything. He orchestrates it all for His glory in the end, even if we can't see it right now. And even the fall of the Roman Empire, we see some of the writers talk about that.
Okay, I'm just going to have you side over a little bit because you're about ready to fall off the edge. Then Thomas Hall followed up a little bit. I guess I'm dyslexic now. Sorry for Jonah. No, that's fine. No problem there. So that was the first poll that was there. And then we had a second poll that was taken shortly after and is very close in verbiage. And again, I'm not going to do it like this. I tried to make it so we could be on the screen at the same time. And good luck on trying to
read it.
Good luck on trying to read that. But what it says is, as the election approaches, talking about the election in the United States, presidential election, what concerns you most about the future of the U.S.? And I said that I know I have viewers here that are not from the U.S., but I said that, even then I do want to know what your opinion is, because there can be global consequences based on the decision that's made here. So what concerns you most about the future of the United States? Division and polarization, number one. Economic instability, number two. Loss of faith in God and inverted values. And number four, global conflicts and competition. So of those, the highest was, and you see again, the line that comes out the most there is loss of faith in God and inverted values. Then you have economic division and polarization and economic instability. Both got 16%. Nothing for global conflicts and competition. I think these are all very important values, very important situations or indicators. But I would agree with the majority of people here in saying that it is loss of faith in God and inverted values. And so some of the comments in here, I did not have comments on the first one. I think I deleted those by accident. And they were good. The comments here, there was one from XYZ to Gru Tamamenchi 7894. What a name. He said, or she said, it can seem cyclical, but the cycles don't cause it. They merely describe and predict it. Talking about cyclical cycles within the rise and fall of nations. What are your thoughts on that? It's the cycles that are there, and it does seem like there are some cycles. You look at them, it does seem like they prove themselves. One of the cycles would be like empires rise in iron boots and they fall in silk slippers. So this person commented, it can seem cyclical, but the cycles don't cause it. They merely describe and predict it. What are your thoughts on that?
No, definitely. There are definitely patterns within the fall of nations that you can definitely look at. Once they abandoning their core values, once they start looking back and even hating themselves in a lot of ways, that's a very bad sign that your country is getting to the point of, it's going to self-implode. Definitely when it starts adopting very deviant activities as their core principles.
Mm-hmm.
We saw that in Rome. We saw that commonplace in Rome towards the end of its fall. Do I say that that's the only factor in it? No, I say it's an indicator of it. you see a light go on, that's not the only reason why your car just exploded. It could be just an indicator that, hey, there's one problem here.
So Kevin, or Kelvyqayo said, I don't think many empires have faith in God to begin with, and core values vary widely. I can't see that as an element. Leadership often matters, but not necessarily. I choose the cycles, not because they are the cause, but the factor is the reality that this is the way of all things. Everything breaks down. Economies, values, leadership, it always ebbs and flow. God's will be done in any case. So here's one thing that I would say. When you have, when the Mosaic covenant was given to Israel, and Moses had split the people in two, and there was the blessings and the cursings, and they had talked about, if you follow these commands, these things, these good things will happen. And if you disobey God's plan, these bad things will happen. And basically, it was done like a covenant relationship and an agreement there, a contract that was given to say, yeah, we're going to do this. So they were basically signing the contract to say that they would follow this. And this covenant there is something that was given for them, but not necessarily for us. We, after Israel was, we as Christians don't have that level of national covenant with God, but we do have an individual covenant with God. Nevertheless, if a nation follows God, do you believe that there will be natural good consequences that come out of it? And if a nation falls away from God, there would be natural bad consequences that follow.
Yes.
Okay.
Of course. I mean, if we again pull up the United States as an example of this, I'd say one of the biggest goods that we've had is the freedoms that were established at the beginning, and those came directly from God, from a Judeo-Christian belief system, saying that these were rights given by God, not given by a nation or some authority other than God himself. Mm-hmm. These were inalienable human rights given to you from God that comes directly out of Christian and Judeo beliefs. That foundation is very good. As we get away from that and have purged that from any point of the government, who gives those rights? It eventually becomes the government giving those rights to the people, and what the government gives, it can take away.
Right.
Which becomes very dangerous.
Right. Good point. Jack Ray said, the establishment of the Roman Empire was the establishment of the downfall of Rome. Rome was a republic, and going to empire tossed away their core values.
Yeah, the shift there.
Right. So that in a way, that could be the beginning of the downfall for that. Well, it was the downfall of the republic and the birth of the
empire format. The empire format then expanded much further than what the republic originally did, and eventually collapsed upon itself just because, well, a lot of factors.
True. So stacking up the kings of Israel and Judah. First, a little history. Not everyone is familiar with the kings of ancient Israel and Judah, and you might ask, well, what does this have to do with me? And that's a good question. In studying history, we might discover universal patterns and principles that transcend time. A brief history of ancient Israel would start with the whole covenant relationship that God had with them, and when they took the land of Canaan, they divided it up amongst the different tribes, and 12 tribes. And go in and talk about the half tribe of Manasseh. And this is 12 tribes of Israel. This was the allotment that they were given according to what was written. Now, it didn't really happen this way because why didn't they get all the land?
Because humans are humans and they're idiots.
Okay, that's really kind of a cop-out. Why did they not get all the land? Can you be more specific?
Well, counts on which situation. Which one are you referring to directly? Because when they originally came in, they chased some of them out, but did not completely.
That's right.
take
There
the
was
land.
not.
Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah. That was what happened. That's what happened in their history, right? Is that they did not follow God's commands to take the land, and because they didn't follow through, they didn't. The whole allotment wasn't given out. But this was the portion that was given according to the different tribes, and then the extent of Israel's. Okay, here's another question. And this, I would ask you guys this in the chat too. When was the fullest extent of Israel's boundaries? When was their golden age? Because you have, let's talk about, you have the time of Joshua coming in, taking the land. Then you have the time of the judges after that, where they didn't have no king. And you say it was more of an almost like an anarchy type of experience, but it was tribal. And the idea was God was their king, that they would have the central place of worship, which was the tabernacle. They come here and they do their worship and everything, and they did not need a king because God was established as the main seat of authority. But they complained because other people had it. No one else had. Everybody else has a king. We don't have one. We want to do it. And God warned them and said, "This is really kind of dumb." Because kings they're not good. They're going to tax you. They're going to send your sons to war. They're going to tell you to do things you don't want to do. You do not want a king. They said, "We want a king." So he said, "Okay, I'll give you a king." So after the time of judges, they did have kings, and they had a golden age there. So at what point, under what king, did they have the greatest extent of land, and their economy was the greatest? What king was that? And I ask you or them. I don't care.
If you're asking me, that would be King David towards the end of his reign. I'm talking later half of his reign.
Actually, Solomon, but yes.
Well, they would have led into Solomon, but Solomon had such high taxes at that point that really put a strain on their economy.
Well, yeah. So we did have.
So you're asking when? I'd say just right there, the last couple of years of David's reign was probably the most expansive when they were at the largest point and had the most income coming in.
Nope. It was Solomon. Solomon's time had the golden age. David did lead up to it. It did leave the foundation, but it was under Solomon. And with his treaties and everything, he was able to bring it. But the treaties also came as a price because he compromised a lot. And part of the compromise was, even though he's the smartest man, he had all these concubines and everybody to make treaties with the nations around him. And you go, but you can see in the map here the full extent. Let's see, all the way up. I believe, I forget what river that is. I think it's Euphrates. That was the fullest extent of the kingdom of the large kingdom of Israel. And then after that, they split, right? And then we have the turmoil that goes on. And it was the taxes that had done it, because when his son took over and said, "You thought my dad's taxes were bad. Wait until you see me. Dad, hold my beer. No beer. Hold my wine. Here's what I'm going to really let them have it." And then the kingdom split. You had the northern kingdom of Israel and the southern kingdom of Judah, and they had then it was smaller extent of their land. They weren't able to accept. You look at this gold. It's the Gaza Strip right there. Even back then, the Philistine states, which are not Palestinians, but the Philistine states there, and divided up. So the question that I have for today is that during those split, you had the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom. Here's the list of all the kings. The books of First and Second Kings in the Bible cover each bad king with a formulaic report that goes something like, "He did evil in the sight of the Lord," or like in 2 Kings 5:4 says, "The high places, however, were not removed. The people continued to offer sacrifices and burn incense there." So you see all the red in here. The green are good kings and the red are bad. And again, I apologize if this is a bit of an eye chart to be able to see, but you can just look at the red and the green and know. The ones on this side are the kingdom of Judah, the southern kingdom, and the one on this side is the northern kingdom of Israel. And you can see they didn't have any good kings. And the decision about good kings weren't so much about their economic policies or anything like that. It was a question of whether these people were following God or not. Decide to go. So,
oh, no surprise, the one side fell first.
yes. We'll talk about what the bad thing was there, but I want to check a look. Okay, so a couple of the comments here. Thomas Hall said, Solomon, who was only the third king of united Israel, and all went downhill from there. Yes, it did, unfortunately. We have, so with these kings, what was so bad about these high places? They said that the kings would not, big deal there was the kings would not remove these high places.
The Asherah poles and the other place of worship.
The other places.
The other pagan gods who have moved in and taken up residence.
So what's wrong with having an inclusive, diverse, and equitable system? Why not have Yahweh there? And we can also include those other gods. I mean, there's, we're just all one people, and, whatever works for you, do it.
God doesn't tolerate rivals.
Well, it just sounds like he's jealous. Why wouldn't he do that?
He's a jealous God. That he is.
True. All right. So what happened with these other? Let's think about. Well, let's talk about Molech. What's the deal with
Molech?
Talking
about the human sacrifice, the baby sacrifice?
Yeah,
burning babies alive, which happened in a trench. If memory serves, a trench not very far from Jerusalem,
right?
Where they still refer to it as basically his little grotto area, where they had the baby sacrifice, and thousands of young children were burned alive by their parents.
Okay. So I'm not going to go into too much detail on what happened.
Oh, you don't want me to describe the whole entire sacrifice?
No.
You sure?
I am sure.
Because we can talk about
the bowl
and the hands and how they would heat things and.
Oh, no. Okay, so
you want to keep this PG or something?
You had killing their children. You also had temple prostitutes. So there was flagrant, I don't know what you want to call it, sexual revolution. There's a sexual revolution. They had, Phil's free. Was that? No, we don't want to call it deviance. It's love is love. Okay, so we're going to just be open to all this, and to free society. As well?
Because hello.
Well, I don't know if they actually did that. Do you know any evidence for that? Because I don't think that was on the chart. So they had the temple prostitutes, and all of this was for fertility. They wanted their gods, whoever, to make sure it rained and they had good crops and money. So it was driven by greed, my money, driven by fear because they didn't know what was going to happen. They wanted to make sure they were going to have crops for the next year and so forth. So now here's the question I have for you in that regard. Now this is Israel has a covenant relationship with God. As a nation, we do not. We as a people, we can come and individually and offer ourselves to God. And even the leadership in this nation can come and say, we're one nation under God. Okay, that's great. But it's not the same level of covenant relationship that Israel had. So my question is, what parallels and similarities do you see with everything that we've discussed in here, from the kings to the sacrifices, everything? We haven't even hit the prophets yet. But what parallels do you see with that nation and what was going on there to what we have today? And I'm going to check the chats here too. And Christian Sodium Channel says, I love the anti-Bible videos that claim because there is evidence of Yahweh being portrayed with the spouse in Israel that as much of an idol worship proves the Bible was wrong. Okay, so here's the question. Which came first, chicken and egg, right? This is a little bit off topic here, but it's worth, you know what he's talking about here with?
I'm not sure.
Okay. So there's a little bit of a trend here. Correct me if I'm wrong. The Sodium Christian Sodium Channel. Correct me if I'm wrong. But there is a bit of a trend right now to say that we have evidence, archaeological evidence, showing that the name Yahweh was associated with the God that had a wife and everything like that. So the conclusion is that the Yahweh that modern Jews or Jews of later centuries had worshipped was not originally that, but it was not the original Yahweh that we see in the Bible, in the Torah and so forth, but it was this pagan deity that was renamed and recast as the Yahweh of the Torah.
That I also heard that it was another pagan deity that the nomadic people used to worship, and whenever Israel was in the desert, they adopted this nomadic religion into theirs and sort of integrated it in, and that's where they get Yahweh from. It's not. There's no actual. Once you look into it, there's no actual evidence for it. I mean, someone's just wild speculation.
Okay, so let me see what he says here. He says, I've been ancient Israelite idols, with my own eyes in Walter's Art Museum. And he says, yes, they ignore that the Bible explicitly documents these abominations. So their narrative says it was originally a polytheistic thing, a married God, and Jews later on changed it to fit their narrative. Where we're saying it was originally a name given to Moses that then was co-opted in these later years. That's documented in the age of the Kings, First and Second Kings, where these other nations, they mixed it all in.
They started integrating other gods into the culture,
right,
and compromising themselves. In fact, in all your lists, not a single one of those good kings was ever good because he respected the astropoles or the high places, right? That's always considered a mark against him.
You're talking about the good kings?
The good kings on your list.
Okay.
They're never marked. They're good. They were never marked or referred to as being good because they respected the high places and the astropoles. It was the opposite. It was a mark against them.
Oh, I see what you're saying. They did good, but they still left the high places there.
Yes,
there was I believe Josiah did get rid of them. I had to go back and take a look, but I believe there was a cleansing there. But it was very rare that there was a wholesale take it out. And I think, imagine yourself as a point of leadership to say, if I come out and try to get rid of all this stuff, there's going to be a rebellion against me. I can't, because the people will not let me do this. They'll basically dethrone me as king. So I have to kind of play loose here. I'll improve things. I'll make it better, but I can't do the whole thing. So my question still remains: what parallels do you see here in ancient Israel to what we have today?
Well, they compromise their principles with God, where we have basically abandoned Christianity in a lot of ways in the United States. At least the Christian principles that founded the nation, just having general respect for the nation itself and not painting it as a bad character the entire time. I don't know how many times I've heard it referred to as some great evil, this nation that has given more people more rights than any other nation so far in history.
Okay. I'm waiting for the parallels.
I don't see any.
To the Old Testament?
To strictly, if you're looking for strict, absolute parallels, no. Because it's two completely different objects.
No. Okay. So now don't, when I say this, you're going to hold my feet to the fire, say it's strict. I'm not talking about strict, absolute. What I'm saying is there are parallels here. And the Molech, you are sacrificing your children. You're killing your children for the sake of economy.
In that sort of sake for a god, yes, economy you could claim because benefits for yourself. But yes, you could say that would be abortion. There would be a parallel there.
Absolutely.
There are some parallels in that regard, yes, but there aren't. I was looking for strong parallels within the actual governmental structure. No, that's what you were referring to, because that's what we were talking about.
No. Okay, so a downfall of a nation as it goes away from God. Do we see parallels here between what we're struggling with now here as a nation, the sins of our nation, versus the sins of ancient Israel. I believe there's a lot there. We did have, although there was not a strict covenant relationship at the beginning of the United States with God, there was a lot of strong, like you said, a strong Christian foundation that was there. And we have deviated in large part from that. And now we are dealing with this kind of Molech situation where we are killing our children in the womb in mass because of economic, largely, but not always. There's other reasons too, but a large part is I can't afford to have a baby now. I can't, I'm going through college. A baby will ruin my career opportunities. It'll ruin my life. I have to get rid of it. And then, or I have too many children. I can't afford to have any more children. I have to get rid of it. So, and again, not always the reason for it, but it does seem like there's a lot of times that is a reason given for deciding to have an abortion. So you have that similarity. Sexual promiscuity and a lot of it just delving, heading that way, like with porn and with the disintegration of the family unit and so forth right now here too, with the temple prostitutes and with what was happening there. People are saying, well, we need to be able to have an open and free society with that. How much does that end up destroying our society in the process? You look at divorce rates and so forth. We have that other live stream. We're talking about childless cat women and about how with that comes increase of mental illness, or at least claiming of mental illness. So I'm going to check the chat here real quick.
Nope, I already did that one. Next one down.
Okay, next one down. Sorry. Proto-virtue?
Proto-virtue signaling. Virtue signaling before virtue signaling was phrased.
Yes. Sexual lewdness, gender, fluidity, pediastry. Oh my gosh, what the heck is that one? I'll go with what you're saying there, brother. Drugs, sorcery, rock and roll, demon worship. So there's a lot of that's in there. Same with the prostitutes. They were for fertility. The
fertility rights with them.
Right. And since they were an agrarian society, they needed to have that extra stability with the rights. So with the kings, there were also prophets with this. So prophets, what's the definition of a prophet according to the usage in the Old Testament? Before I give an answer for that, I'm going to be looking for the answer in the chat for that too. See what you guys say for this. I'm going to ask you, since your background is working with Muslims, what is the Islamic definition of a prophet?
Prophet would be someone who brings the word of God to the people. In Islam, that would be, you can think of Muhammad being, according to them, the last and greatest prophet. Basically, a prophet would be anyone that's mentioned in Islam in the Quran at all, according to their concept around it. But it would be that they get special revelations, and those are given to the people in Muhammad's way, more like a list of rules that people are supposed to follow.
In the Quran, is there anybody listed that's not, other than Muhammad, contemporary with Muhammad, as being a prophet?
No.
Okay.
No, absolutely not. No.
So he was the only one at that time giving. Yeah, I always think it's kind of funny when they mention like King David being a prophet, or that Lot being Abraham's nephew, being a prophet. I'm thinking, how in the world were they getting?
And the problem is, you got to ask, when exactly are you asking this question? Are you asking the question about, because it changed throughout the Quran's period. Early Quran statements are different than later Quran statements of what a prophet is.
Okay.
By the way, there's a divide, because every nation originally, it sounded like every nation was given a prophet, and Muhammad was the prophet for the Arabs there to outreach to them, to give them the gospel that the Christians were already given, because they were given it by Jesus. And then you had the Israelites were given it to by Moses, was given the law and all the rules and everything.
So then why do they call David king? He's a king, right? Why do they call him a prophet?
He is referred to as being a prophet in the Bible in one section. But yes, they in their minds, anyone that is mentioned in a holy book is a prophet.
In the Quran, is anybody mentioned besides Muhammad?
Yes, Jesus, Moses, Abraham, Adam.
Abu Bakr?
No.
Okay.
Well, there are also others that are referenced at their same time period. They're not really terribly consistent with that, and there's no real. If you don't look at the hadith, there's no real clarification on who this is, because I know Zayd is mentioned in it, but his relationship, their relationship with Muhammad and what happened there and all the intricacies there, there's nothing in the Quran. It's not until you see the hadith 200 years later that you actually get the sequel.
Okay, so I'm going to look at some of the chat here. It says prophet speaks to God to the temple, and then he came back later and said, oops, botched that, typing stupid iPad. So I'm going to try to make as much sense of this as I can. Priests, beings, people to God. I'm going to speak. Okay, so I'm going to pretend that you are an old man who may be a president who has a hard time saying things, or maybe says things, admits, I'm not saying who, saying things amiss.
Joe Biden.
And then someone's going to reinterpret what you're saying. So I'm going to pretend like you're saying prophets point the people back to God, and priest represents God to the people, or the with the sacrifices and everything, present those to God from the people's side. So the prophets say, look back at the law, specifically in the Old Testament, point back to the law. They point the people of Israel says, don't forget this, get back to this. This is what God has called you to. So they don't necessarily they weren't necessarily bringing the Torah. They were pointing it back. Now, there's also some foretelling that's going on there as well. They're saying, well, these things will happen if you do this. These things will happen if you don't. There's going to be the restoration of the kingship of David, talking about that. A whole lot of discussion about the Messiah, the suffering servant, and so forth. So that's all wrapped up in prophetic role. And it says, why do they consider Lot a prophet?
The only thing I think of is he's mentioned in the Bible, and that's about it. Because they refer to him as being a prophet, they'll often make that accusation against Christians, saying, you have prophets who sleep with their own daughters. And it's like, what are you talking about? You're talking about Lot? Yeah. I have yet to meet a single Christian who says Lot is a prophet of theirs.
Yeah, no.
In fact, the whole point of the entire thing is he got drunk. He didn't have an option in the matter. He was drugged by his daughters in order to put him into that situation. The only reason they were in that situation to begin with was because they were disobedient to God.
It would be considered rape by today's standards. His daughters raped him.
Yep.
Usually don't have, as a guy, usually don't get raped by women, but I guess in that
it does happen, too. And that would be an example of it. And again, they were only
like a date rape, but it wasn't a date.
Yeah, they were only in that situation. They were only in that cave because they didn't follow the instructions God gave them.
Well, they were okay. So in that little bit of a side note, in that situation, they were worried that was like the end of the world. They just saw this.
They thought it was,
city get nuked basically, and they're saying, for whatever reason, either we need to start over, or he's the only guy around. And from their point of view, their economy and the way they had done things, the only way you had a future is if you had babies. So.
Yeah, only in that situation, because they didn't follow what God's instructions were, which if they would have followed God's instructions, they would have met up with Abraham at that time.
That's a lesson to us too. How many times do we think that we're out of fear, out of an impossible situation. You think, I know God says to do this. I know I should be doing this, but I have to cheat somehow. I have to make it happen. And this is the only way I can make it happen.
Yeah.
Is by doing this. And it didn't work out too well because you know who their descendants.
Abraham did that too.
Yeah.
So
actually, his wife said that. His wife said, "Let's do it this way." And it wasn't so much a cheat. I don't know. From Abraham's point of view, it wasn't so much a cheat. It might be like, God said this is going to happen. He didn't really give me an instruction book on how it was going to happen.
He specifically said, "Your wife will be pregnant."
Yeah, that's true.
When I return next year, your wife will be pregnant.
Yeah, I did say that.
And that seems like it gave a very specific time frame too.
You're right.
It's like, okay, so the dude didn't even wait a year.
Yeah.
Wait.
Well, it's like, so she was past menopause, right? Obviously.
Yeah, she was an old one. She's an old woman.
I could delve into that a little bit more, but I think I'm going to stay away from that minefield. Okay, so we got a lively chat here. Let me see what else we got going on. It says, don't forget the time. Okay, so I'm back up a little.
Yes.
Okay, I'll get back to that. I'll get back to that. He said, I meant to say, a prophet speaks when speaks to people from God. A priest is the other way around. Exactly. And as BIC says, BIC.
That's me.
Is that you?
That's me.
Come on, man. Okay.
I don't know if I said that, but
I'll say that. I'll be the old man here. Come on, man. Don't forget the time they worshipped Ezra. Gee, I forget which book that's in. Yeah, what's the deal
that's
with
Quran 9:30? They claim that the Jews say that Ezra, that there is, they're saying that he is the son of God, but Christians say the Messiah is the son of God, and that's the reason for Quran 9:29.
Was there ever a Jewish sect that did that?
Not in known history ever. We still have no clue who this dude is.
Stuff like that is enough for if I was a Muslim, and I read that, I'd be questioning my faith because that's historically.
It counts on where you're grown up. Because if you grow up in a place like in a Muslim nation, they'll tell you that this is a well-known fact. It's well documented that they used to do this. Recently, the Jews have covered this whole thing up.
Oh yeah,
they don't want to. And
the Jews.
I've talked to.
They're hiding behind that tree.
Who is it? Yusama. And he would tell me about that stuff, that they would these were things that were they would teach you.
And he was raised in Egypt, right?
Egypt, yep.
And growing up. Well, you know what? You got the internet now, and maybe that's why there is so much apostasy.
There's an avalanche of apostasy because of people being able to fact check this stuff and say, no, there's no evidence. And if this was a common Jewish belief for centuries, up until even after the time of Muhammad, because it would have had to have been during the time of Muhammad, because Muhammad mentioned it in one of his visions that Allah told him about. So it would have had to have been then. So if sometime after that, it would have had to have been a mass conspiracy in order to cover everything up just to make this one verse wrong.
Wow.
And why would they do that?
Wow. So
because they don't like Muslims, I guess.
Well, no. I don't care what the internet says. The sun sets in a pool of muddy water. Okay, and we'll just keep on going from there. Right? Isn't that what it says?
Yes, it does. Okay. Very clearly, it says that.
And NASA said that too.
Dul-Qarnain found it.
Dul-Qarnain.
Dul-Qarnain, which is Alexander the Great, found
but then they change it. It's no longer Alexander the Great.
They claim it, but if you look at the Romance of Alexander the Great, if you actually read the book and then read what the Quran says about Dul-Qarnain, it's like, there's a 1-to-1 ratio.
Okay, so Christian Sodium Channel said, and they also did it technically to save the world. It's argued that it wasn't meant to be a lewd act, talking about Lot and his daughters, I guess. But them growing up in such a foul area, they didn't realize how sick it was. Yeah, I guess.
Remember, they just
coming from
Sodom
and Gomorrah.
I forget which town it was. It was either Sodom or Gomorrah. But one of those towns, he came from there. So, yeah, it wasn't like a very nice place. It was a very sexually deviant place in a lot of ways.
I would have moved, man. You know what? He should have homeschooled his kids. That's all I can say. Would have saved a lot of trouble. I just learned from John of Damascus. That is why Muslims were called Saracens or something. Wasn't that because descended from Sarah?
I do not know off the top of my
That
head.
doesn't make
No,
sense
that wouldn't
because
make
that
any
would
sense
that
at
would
all.
be not Ishmaelites because they were also called Ishmaelites.
No, they claim it, but there's still.
I
some
should know
serious
this because I did
question about
the study on the Moors in Spain, because they called them Saracens during the Middle Ages also. Truth defenders. Oh, we got joining the pack there. I am just trying to catch. What's that?
Maybe the last one.
Okay.
Two.
There is your parallel with today, maybe. And what is that?
That they're doing it to save the world? I don't know.
Maybe if you can specify, and we're gonna continue to move on. So prophets' role in the fall of Jerusalem of Israel and Judah. So we did kind of go over who the prophets were. They were pointing people back to God and specifically back to the law, and said, "Guys, get back! Guys, get back! Guys, get back!" You almost seem like the traffic light has gone out. No one's listening to the traffic light, and you have a police officer out there directing traffic. That's kind of what they were doing in the roles that they were playing. So the warnings, though, were ignored. You had prophets like Elijah, Isaiah. You had prophets that were the ones that wrote books and the ones that did not. An example of a prophet that wrote book would be Isaiah. A prophet that did not write a book would be Elijah. During David's reign, these kings often had prophets, local royal prophets, so to speak. And do you remember who his
Solomon? Not Solomon. Samuel.
Nope.
First Second Samuel.
No. Because that was early.
Oh,
Nathan,
that was beforehand.
Nathan was, and he's the guy who nailed David with the whole thing about Bathsheba and Uriah, and he tells him the story about this guy with these sheep, and like David's like, "Yeah, that guy should be killed," and Nathan looks at him and says, "That be you, my lord." And
He'll take some guts.
Yeah, he did. So you did have some local. That was good because they needed to be brought back to the Lord. So you had a role of a prophet, you had a role of a priest, and you had a role of a king. And of course, there was one person who fulfilled all three of those, and that was Jesus, who spoke prophetically, who was a priest, a high priest in the order of Melchizedek, according to the book of Hebrews, and he was king, being a descendant of David, line of David. And that's why you have the genealogy in Matthew and in Luke showing it from both sides of his parentage, although from his father it didn't really matter because his father was God, bringing it down and showing that he was the descendant of David. He was actually the king of Israel. So I'm going to ask you a question. Are there any modern day figures, religious or otherwise, who serve as prophetic voices today, warning nations or leaders? And I'm not talking about necessarily, there is a gift of prophecy. I believe it's still available today. I'm not talking specifically about that necessarily, but I'm talking about the whole thing of pointing back. Is there anybody who today fills those type of roles? And then while you're answering that, I'm going to check the chat for previous questions that have come up. Let's see. Oh, okay. So the parallel for today, he was answering, he said, this was growing up in lewd culture.
That explains it. Yeah, growing up very lewd culture.
There is, okay, so the jury's still out on this. And this is in regards to this. So we're talking about Lot's daughters saying, hey, let's have babies with daddy because no one else is around. And you know what? That's the kind of thing that happened back home anyway. So not their family home, but basically their hometown. When I was a kid growing up, the only way that you could get a hold of porn was either a magazine. With being a kid, that's the only way that maybe your dad's got, Playboy or Penthouse or something like that you can get a hold of. Or if you get older, get into a movie theater that showed straight out X-rated porn movies. right? This is before the age of VHS, DVDs, anything like that, right? So you didn't have a home theater. And then it moved into VHS, DVD, having porn there. And then now we're totally accessible to this without anything holding us back. You know, if you're a kid trying to get a hold of a magazine, porn magazine, maybe at a gas station or something, it was behind the shelf, it'd be covered, you couldn't see it. You can ask for that. You would get carded. You ask for ID. There's no way that you as a kid get, unless maybe the cashier just say, hey, all right, kid, here, you can have this. You couldn't do that. Now you have it totally accessible. The question for this, growing up in a lewd, lascivious culture, how are our children going to be different going forward, having access as close as this? We saw what happened in my generation and previous generations when it was available in magazine form, or maybe, you know, far off theaters, being able to see it there. But how does it impact us? I say that as a question. What's that?
There's massive impacts within our culture to that regard. And that it's even considered, definitely in the secular culture, as either being a rite of passage or just being commonplace, which is extremely dangerous for our society.
We look at kids now and they can't even tell. They're so confused and reaching out for help and trending with multiple, define your own gender, that's all in there. Having no idea what God created sex for, and the sanctity of marriage, and how beautiful and wonderful it can be when it's there done correctly. It's, you know, with the proper, it's discipline there. You have to discipline yourself, right? But the best things come with discipline. So answering a previous question about any prophets that are for today, Truth Defenders, Francis Schaeffer. And man, I almost wish there was a call in. Let's see how, here's I think expounding on that. How should we then live? Documentary by Francis Schaeffer. Yes. And that was a siren call that I wish previous generation would have listened to a little bit better. When we get to the fourth turning part, man, there's some really scary, crazy stuff that goes on with that. It says, wow, writings of Jerome are the earliest known version of the claim that Ishmaelites chose to be called Saracens in order to identify with Abraham's free wife, Sarah. Ooh, I am going to make sure I write that down, because that is good history there, brother. Did this, scrambled TV channel. I think maybe he's talking about the porn part. People will find lewdness in anything too. People would watch sheep, look at Sears catalogs. All it takes is no reason to avoid. Yeah, I think you're right. And
I think it's a heart issue too.
Never heard of Schaefer. Look him up. Good man. So I think there are some people that point back, even in this, on the secular side. So saying somebody fulfills a prophetic role in a way, in pointing people back to our, the original good founding principles that are here. You might have some people in media, news media, who would say, listen, we need to get back to the original founding documents that we had and so forth. So you can even look at some of them. So what happened as a consequence for abandoning God? What consequences are there for this? What happened to Israel and Judah when they abandoned God? How is our relationship with God different from Israel and the relationship that Israel and Judah had with God? So I'm putting those out as questions to the chat. What consequences are there for abandoning God from a national standpoint? And then how was their relationship with God different from our relationship with God today? So walking away from God, are there any economic and social consequences?
Absolutely. Degradation of principles, moral relativism starts playing heavily into a society, because if there is no absolute value in human life, there is no reason that every life is the same value.
Right. You can say, even like Oh, maybe using evolution as a way to justify that some races are superior to others. That was used by Nazi Germany to say that some should be exterminated because we want the whole idea of eugenics.
The Olympics right beforehand were
1936 Olympics.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because you had they were going in there with that attitude that blue-eyed, white-haired, or not white-haired, but blonde hair. That's the ideal of humanity, and that's the cream of crop. And then you had an African-American win.
Yes. Oh,
which
gosh,
was hilarious.
You're gonna somebody's in the chat's gonna remember his name or look it up at least. Yes.
So funny.
Yes.
Because it was like you're sitting there. There's the proof that you were wrong right there in front of you.
So military consequences, turning away from God weakened their kingdoms, leading to invasions by the Assyrians and Babylons. This is where God uses other nations to bring Israel down. Spiritual decline, how spiritual decay has affected every aspect of society, from leadership to the common people. How has, and put this out as a question too, in what ways have we seen societal decay over the last two or three generations going back, because we have been walking further and further from God? So I'm going to check the chat on previous questions that were out there. Let's see. It says, for women now, it's empowering to be sexually promiscuous. Yeah, I would have. That is really. When has that trend really started? That's been like, I don't see the 2000s. It's really started to pick up. There's a little bit of that, with the sexual revolution back in the 60s. No,
it definitely became much more prevalent in the 2000s.
I remember in high school when I was growing up, in the 80s and so forth, that was not a thing, man.
No, definitely is nowadays. It's like if you want to wait until marriage, there's something wrong with you.
And I could see where they tie that to abortion.
Yeah.
Because that's a part of freeing from them. They don't have to have the baby. They can get rid of it.
There's no consequences.
Say it. It's not it. It's either a he or a she. Get rid of the baby. Oh my gosh. Okay, so what else do we have? Strong delusions is the judgment. Strong delusion is the judgment. He gave him over to a depraved mind, not able to discern anymore between right and wrong, because you've been so jaded in not listening to what's morally right. I'm guessing that's what you're saying here. Then Thomas, I said, Thomas Hall, indeed, there's no coincidence. The biggest insult to a young man is to be called a virgin.
Yep. Yeah, that's huge now. There's also large when I was growing up too. So,
well, even for me, that was.
You're inexperienced. You don't know what you're doing. You look down. You're a noob.
Well, you're also saying that you're not a man until you've had sex. So, and that's really a lie. Now, being married and having children definitely does mature you. Does make you.
Yeah, but they don't want
more
the children
of an adult.
part.
But they don't think of it
the
that
children
way.
Part. They just
it's just having a sexual experience. It's like, no. Nope. That's not it. So Romans 1:18 through 32. Without looking that up, Romans chapter 1 talks to the Gentiles, saying how it was God gave them over to a depraved mind. I'm betting that's what you're talking about there. Unless you.
No, that's what he's.
Okay, unless you want to look it up.
He just referred to that being
right
before.
Right. That. Okay. And documentary by Good Fight Ministries, Hollywood's War on God, documents how Hollywood is intentionally leading people away from God. I've got to check that out, especially with the focus of this channel mostly being on movies and literature that's coming out.
Might not be bad to do a review on it.
That would be. Sounds like a good one. I'm going to earmark that one. And 2 Thessalonians 2:10 through 12. Thank you. Marking that one. And he says, because they received not the love of truth, that they may be saved. And for this cause, God shall send them a strong delusion that they should believe a lie.
Well, wait, what truth are you talking about? Are you talking about your truth or are you talking about my truth?
That's the delusion.
Right
That's
there.
the delusion. Okay, so let me just, this is a little off topic, but let me bring this up as a question. Scary. Yeah,
Very
definitely scary. And basically losing your mind.
Common statement nowadays.
So let me bring this up as a question, because this almost looked like God is authoring or creating a lie here.
Yep.
He gave them over to, sent them a strong delusion that they would believe a lie. Isn't God the author of truth? Why would he do that?
Turning them over, they've already rejected the truth. They've already, over and over and over again, they're already saying, no, we don't want the truth. We want a lie. We want to believe this lie. Fine. Turn it over.
I think it's a lot like, I remember this in my own life, actually, rebelling against God, pulling away. And the Holy Spirit put a picture in my mind, even in my rebellion, put this picture in my mind. I was like a dog pulling away from my master. And I was on a leash, and he said, don't go there, don't go there, don't go there. And he's trying to save me from something bad. And the leash is not there to restrict my freedom. It's to restrict my self-destruction. And he said, fine. And let go. And that action, when that happens, when you rebel enough against God and he lets go, says, okay, you want it? You can have it. It's free will. God honors that. Man, you do not want to be in that place. That is a very ugly, destructive place, and pray to God that you are not given over to a depraved mind, because you will not have the sense to realize how messed up and bad situation you're in, that you need to turn the other way. You need to get back. You need to be in the Father's arms. So, and we're looking at that on the national level too, is we are pulling away, fighting at the leash, saying no, 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 and God will let us go, and that is a tough place to be. And make sure that I'm not scaring anything. Yes, I am. I'm skipping some things. He has nothing to do with them.
Talking about after just releasing.
Yes.
Being done with it.
Yes. I struggle with why Isaiah and Jesus say they speak in parables to, there you go, to they will not hear the truth and believe, but I think it speaks to superficial lip service. So here's my take on that. The disciples came to Jesus and says, why are you speaking in parables? And Jesus quotes Isaiah there, saying, these people are always hearing but never perceiving, always listening but never understanding, that they might turn and be saved. And the answer is, look, you need to catch this. If you don't catch it, and I put it out there plainly for you, you're going to be totally responsible for it, and it's going to be worse for you. I'm pulling this back to only those people who have ears to hear. They're attentive. They want to know. I'm not going to be casting the pearl before swine. If you really, really want to know, here it is. It's not going to be open for everybody. It's only for those who really want to know the truth. And it's the same thing with Pharaoh. Pharaoh hardened his heart, repeatedly says, and then God says he hardened his heart. Yeah. And surely Jesus knows how to convince with more than words.
Yeah.
But he wanted convinced hearts. Yes. Yeah. It's the heart and soul is what he desires. So comparing the modern theories of empire decline to what we were just talking about, there's more than one reason why empires fall. And there's, like you were saying earlier, that there's multiple reasons why this might all come together. And you look at the fall of the Western Roman Empire, why that was, and you can even take a look at the fall of the Eastern Roman Empire, the fall of the Aztecs, the fall Alexander the Great, why his empire, short-lived, fell. What happened to the Mongols? What happens to smaller nations that would happen? What happened to the British Empire? That once was a time when the sun never set on the British Empire. So all these nations come and rise and fall, and there does seem to be a certain cycle to each of them beyond just whether people follow God or not. What consequences are there to this? So Strauss, Howe generational theory. I don't know if you ever heard this one before much at all. Okay, so let me just do a real quick overview on what it is. It's also called the fourth turning. It aligns with the old adage that empires rise in iron boots and fall in silk slippers, which suggests that societies or empires are born out of hard times and struggle, but fall into decline due to luxury, complacency, and softness. This idea echoes the theory of cyclical view of history, where each cycle begins with a crisis, a fourth turning, and leads to a new high, a first turning, during which society strengthens through collective effort. Over time, as the awakening, the third turning, the second turning, and unraveling phases, the third turning, occur, society becomes more individualistic, sound familiar, more self-focused, and disconnected from the challenges that at once made it strong. Eventually, this weakening of societal cohesion leads to a new crisis, the fourth turning, and it cycles through again. We can look at what happened with the book of Judges, that they followed God, got complacent, followed other gods. Lord allowed them to be taken over by adjacent nations. They repented and said, "Oh God, please, we repent. Please forgive us." The Lord delivers them with a judge. They come out of that. They're strong for the Lord. They start to get a little complacent, follow other gods, and the cycle starts all over again.
And we're just talking about generations, like generation 1, generation 2, generation 3.
Yes. So examples of fourth turning would be the American, you can even go back much further than the American Revolution, but the American Revolution, the crisis of the 1770s and the 1780s reset American society to lead the establishment of the U.S. as an independent nation. Do you realize that during the Revolutionary War, we look back on it now and say, okay, you know, the Patriot, we're all going to fight and stuff like this. But there were a lot of people who were, and it was like maybe a tenth of the population that left the U.S. after the Revolutionary War. A lot of people that were loyalists. Mm-hmm. And they fought internally in the U.S. There were many casualties among colonists themselves, fighting amongst themselves during the Revolutionary War. So, that was not easy. We look back at that. And Civil War was another fourth turning in the U.S. In the 1860s, crisis transformed American society with the abolition of slavery and the redefinition of federal power. That was a consequence, but going into the Civil War, it was not necessarily about abolition. Although there was a big abolitionist movement that came afterwards. There was reasons why that came in and so forth. But there was all this tension that was going on in the cycling. And you can look at from generation to generation how this happens to go through. And then we get the Depression. This is 80-year cycle, more or less. Great Depression and World War II. The 1930s and 1940s saw the rise of strong government institutions, global recording. They were looking at, just like right now, they're saying like, oh, a certain presidential candidate is literally Hitler. He's a fascist. They were saying that about FDR with the New Deal. They were saying, look at him. He's just taking this over. And there may have been a civil war in the United States in the 1930s, approaching the 1940s, had we not got involved with World War II. There was enough of a division like what we have right now during that era that was splitting the world apart. You look back now and say, we were really a solid nation, only because there was a crisis that had happened. So these all happened. So I'm going to take a look at first of all, what are your thoughts about that? And at the same time, I want to get your thoughts.
Go ahead and take a look at what they got there.
Okay, so
I think there's only one comment there at the end.
At the end here? Okay. Yes. Hard times make strong men. Prosperity breeds weakness and complacency. That's it. So we got to be careful when we do this. When God blesses us, then we don't get complacent and our blessing.
Hard times make strong men make easy times make weak men make hard times, and repeat.
Right.
Over
so
and over and over again.
I would ask, how many times in your own life have you run into a time where things are good, man? Things are good. No longer reading my Bible, no longer praying, cruising, hard times hit. And then all of a sudden I go for that safety cord again, and I find myself on my knees before the Lord. It's not a bad thing. Sometimes it's needed. So how does this cycle compare to Israel and Judah? Well, we just went through Judges, and God did not leave them alone at that time when they had, even when they were captive by Babylon.
Nope.
God didn't abandon them. God instructed the people of Israel to submit to their Babylonian captors because the Babylonians were acting on his behalf. This can be found in Jeremiah 27, 6 through 8, which said, "Now I will give all your countries into the hands of my servant Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon. I will make even the wild animals subject to him. All the nations will serve him and his son and his grandson until the time of this land comes. Then many nations and great kings will be subject to him." And so God had used the Babylonians as a way to subjugate Israel. This hard time again, they come back. Here's the question. This turning that happens at the end, the nation comes out different than when it went in. Revolutionary War, Civil War, World War II, all of these established something new. If we are at the end of the fourth turning right now, and there is going to come some great turmoil, whether external or internal, whatever it is, a great crisis where we're going to have to take off our silk slippers and put on some iron boots, and it's going to be rough in one way or another, and people may die. Don't know what's coming. I would say that because we walked away from God, there is something that's coming here too, in addition to these cycles. The question is, how are we going to establish ourselves afterwards? We could decide as a group of people to say, we're no longer going to follow God. That's a possibility. We're on a knife's edge. It could go the other way. So I think that we really need to be on our knees before the Lord with this. Take a look at any, the book of Judges, I think was an answer to that. Yeah. And then,
I already did those.
Did those? Okay. Thank you. And then here, pendulum swings back and forth. So
I have my glasses on, just FYI. You don't.
That's good. Thank you. When you get down to it, we have so much to cover tonight that we needed to do this. And this is our finale. Jesus, as nations rise and fall, Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and forever. We have the civic duty to participate, but ultimately we are of another kingdom, not of this earth, and God will use the rise and fall of nations for his purpose. Revelation 17:17 says, "For God has put it into their hearts to accomplish his purpose by agreeing to hand over the beast their royal authority until God's words are fulfilled." Every prophetic imagery, even in prophetic imagery, God is shown as orchestrating the actions of rulers and nations to fulfill his ultimate purpose. So, coming up, we are going to be taking a look at Eli, the book of Eli. Now, there is going to be, thank you very much, there's going to be a schedule change coming up. I will not be doing, I'm going to be switching back to doing one show a week instead of two. This is going to come to be a very hard decision to make, but I have been falling behind in getting the audiobook out for my book, The Healing Stone, and I've got to have that ready by January. And because of that, because of all the other obligations I have, work-wise, family-wise, and everything else that's going on, in addition to this show, it takes about 8 to 12 hours per episode to prepare and follow up with each one of these, if not more sometimes. I'm not able to devote the time to it that I would like to, so I'm going to have to pull back. This is going to be temporary. I would assume that after we get some other things settled, that we'd be returning back to twice a week. I would love to be able to do 5 times a week what I did previously. If I was not writing, it was not working, and some other things going on, I could devote my time to this, but I can't. It's just a little bit too much. So we are going to be looking at the book of Eli next Tuesday night, and the only reason why we're doing it tonight and not tomorrow night, doing the show tomorrow night, is because of the election. It's going to be crazy. Everybody's going to be watching that instead of this, at least here in the United States. Other places may be tuned into that as well. So I just check the chat real quick before we do our typical sign off.
You really like the book of Eli?
Really like the book of Eli. Most of it except the very end.
Yes, I would agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's my opinion as well.
We'll cover that when we get to it. It's like, guys,
we'll cover why.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would agree.
Yeah.
That would be my sentiment as well.
Yeah. So we might even do that as a watch. How about doing that as a watch party?
Sounds good to me.
So let's do this. Next Tuesday night, we'll do a review on that. If you happen to get a chance to catch the movie, if you've seen it before or have never seen it, see if you can watch it sometime this week. And then we'll interact with you guys afterwards. I would love very much to be able to watch it with you, but because of copyright and everything, obviously won't be able to do that. But we can definitely talk about it afterwards and get your feedback as well. So until then, I appreciate everybody's time in here, and we...
Oh, and in case I don't see you, good afternoon, good evening, and good night.